Welcome to the Feeling Loudly podcast, a show about the power and magic of emotion, explored through the lens of astrology, divination, and art. I'm your host, Jana. I'm an astrologer, a tarot reader, Akashic Records reader, poet, and witch, and I'm here to help you feel your feels. Hello, friends. Happy Friday. Welcome to Friday Feels, where we explore an emotion or a human experience from the Reclaim Oracle deck by Little Darkness. If you're new to the podcast, this is a weekly series. I share these episodes every Friday. I draw a card at random, and then I also choose a tarot card from the Lillifer Tarot deck, which is also by Little Darkness. And they're lovely together, and that's part of the reason I like to do these in concert with one another. Normally, I will begin just with some intuitive messages that are coming through from the Oracle deck and dig deeper into that emotional experience. And then I'll speak to the tarot card a little bit and do some Spotify shufflemancy to get a song that can kind of illustrate in a different way the essence and the meaning of this specific experience. I really am loving doing these episodes, and I hope people out there are enjoying them too. I want to let you know that I'm always available for ideas and requests and feedback. So if you do ever have thoughts on what type of content you'd like to see on this podcast in the future, especially for future seasons, you're totally welcome to send me a message on Instagram, to visit my contact form on my website and send me an email there. And if you have not yet heard it, I did publish my first Ask Me Anything episode for May last Friday, and those episodes will be once a month, the first Friday of the month, and I'm collecting questions to speak to or answer on those podcast episodes just on a rolling basis throughout the month. So you can submit your questions via those same contact methods. If you're listening on Spotify, you can also go to the episode page and you'll see that there's like a little, I think it's, how does it actually look on Spotify? I'm not sure, but there's like a submit a question option on the episode page. And on any listening platform, you should also see a voice message link where you can actually send in a little voice memo to me and ask me a question. So those are always available, and I really appreciate the questions that we got last month and enjoyed kind of like rambling my way through answering them. It was fun for me. So I totally welcome any questions you might have. Anything else to announce at the beginning of this? I want to mention that I just made an appearance on Amanda Moreno, who I've mentioned a lot on this podcast, my former teacher, astrologer, wonderful human, who is the host of the Aquarian Spirals podcast. I'm going to link it below. We talked about Taurus for like an hour and 40 minutes, and it was really tasty and really, really lovely, and an honor to be able to be a guest on Amanda's podcast because I love and respect Amanda and her work so much. So if you'd like to go listen to that and kind of dig your little tootsies into Taurus energy during Taurus season, I thought it was a pretty sweet episode, and we got into a lot of cool stuff and did some divination and bibliomancy at the tail end with some, not predictions so much as just like guidance and insight on this current lunar cycle. So starting from the Taurus new moon, which was this Tuesday, through our next new moon next month. Okay. Is that all? I think that might be all. Let's get into our feel for this week. So our card is limitation. And I'm going to start off by reading from the guidebook. Limitation is being small on purpose. Not that smallness is bad, but choosing fear over growth is telling the world I don't have what it needs. It's saying, no, I can't. No, I shouldn't. And making up reasons to disappear into the walls I've built between me and my fate. Limitation is not imposed. It is chosen long after the walls were lifted away. This card The imagery is evocative. There are two figures. They look almost exactly the same, to the point that I think they probably are like the same figure. And one of them is standing like with their shoulders, their abdomen kind of like leaning forward a little bit, staring at this other figure who's kind of backing up and has a hand pressed to that person's chest and another hand that's in a sort of guarded position. And it looks like they're taking a step back. And so there's this like kind of strong arming that's happening where this person is literally pushing this other person away who's trying to lean in. And when I read this card, it's interesting because I used this like spare lovers card from another tarot deck that I have. I used it as a sort of little bookmark in the guidebook for Reclaim. And that feels important. It's not our tarot card for this episode, but it feels important because there's a real contrast going on in the imagery of these two cards. This lovers card features this really beautiful union between two people where there's a sort of reciprocity, and yet there's a little bit of hesitation. These figures are like gently placing one hand in each other's hand. Then they have the other hand over their hearts and they're gazing at each other with a sort of like longing and contentment. But it feels a little bit shy. And so it's got me thinking about how limitation can often show up not just in the way that we present in the world and share our gifts, and maybe the ways that we limit ourselves and experience imposter syndrome or fears around being seen, fears of visibility, and how that can bring up a lot of tension and anxiety. But also how that's an experience that commonly occurs in relationships, especially when there's a fear of intimacy that's present, especially when there's a fear of vulnerability, a fear of opening up, a fear of loss, a fear of abandonment, of hurt. And there's this sort of limitation that we might impose on our relationships, believing that there are outside factors that are the thing, when really it's an inside job. It's a job that we kind of need to do ourselves to go inward and understand what's holding us back from connecting with other people in a vulnerable way, or from opening our hearts to love, or from, experiencing the depth of connection. And this is something that I've been thinking about a little bit because I, as someone who has like experienced a lot of relational trauma and a lot of loss, through the course of my life, especially when I was younger, I don't love to use attachment theory language or therapy speak as much. I used to a lot. I was a psych major and I've done a lot of therapy in my life, and I deeply appreciate what I've gained from it. And also I think there's a sort of sterilizing effect that a lot of it can have on us. And that's lately been kind of the way that I relate to attachment theory, is that I see a lot of benefits and value in it. And also I think it's overly reductive at times, and we might like pin ourselves into an attachment style and then feel really confined to that, when that's genuinely just not really how most people experience connection. But the reason for that aside is that I'm leading up to say that I used to identify as being disorganized attachment, where I would kind of swing between states of anxiety and anxiousness and clinging, and then into avoidance and aloofness and distance in connections. And it's something that I still experience to a degree. I've become much more secure with time, but I was like thinking out loud on Threads the other day about how my relationship to missing people is complicated. I'll find myself missing lovers and partners. I miss my dog when I'm away from her. And I'll like theoretically miss friends, but it's not something that I experience as much with friends and with family. I feel like a real ease in having a lot of distance in many of my connections, and I have really never felt the necessity to talk to people super regularly. It's just not the way that I prefer to connect with people. I love to have like deep intimacy and presence when we can kind of like get into the heart of something and connect over experiences that we're going through, and like have these experiences that feel deeper to me, I guess. And at the same time, I think that there's a way that I kind of hold myself back from intimacy in friendships specifically because of this expectation of loss. It's something I've done in romance too, and with partners too, is holding myself back for fear of losing them. And then sometimes that becoming a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, where because our connection was not allowed to blossom and grow at the rate that it was desiring to, it kind of peters out and dies off, or gets cut off, or something happens that interferes with it. And I've gotten much, 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 much better at just, being vulnerable and being open in connections and being real and authentic and expressing my feelings and my needs. And all of that has transformed my ability to connect with people. But lately I've been noticing the more that I kind of open up, I'm seeing other people's limitations come through and realizing how painful it can be to be on the other side of that, especially when you know that someone is like wanting connection, but you can feel them holding themselves back, or when you can tell that someone like loves you or cares for you, but there's that feeling of them pushing you away, like putting one hand on your chest and pushing you away. And it's a really complicated experience to go through, to be on either side of that. And I think it's something that our tarot card today, which is the Nine of Pentacles, is very, very resonant with. Weird sentence structure. But the Nine of Pentacles is a very on point pick for this experience because it's a card of independence. It's a card of self-reliance and self-sufficiency. And interestingly, these are topics that Amanda and I talked about on her podcast today, that Taurus energy can be very self-reliant to the point of being hyper-independent at times and having a fear of needing people. And when I think about need, the Nine of Pentacles is not a card of need. The Nine of Pentacles is sort of like, I have everything I need. Why? I don't need that because I have everything that I need. And there's a sort of opulence and abundance that's experienced with the Nine of Pentacles, which can be absolutely beautiful and a lovely thing to experience, certainly if you have abundance and just like a breadth of resources and security. And it can be at times isolating. It's like building a mountain for yourself to sit atop. And it's not until we reach the Ten of Pentacles that there's a sort of more communal aspect to resource and to what I have and what I can then offer, how I can be in reciprocity and community, and how we can share this abundance among ourselves. But the Nine of Pentacles is a card that in almost every deck I have that features humans, it's a card where you see one person on their own, and they have done a lot of hard work to get where they get, or to get where they are. And when they reach that place, it's like, look at all of this. Who is here to share it with me? And that's something that, is feeling tender for me as a Taurus person who has struggles with self-isolating, and I'm finding myself living in a place again where I really don't know many people. And so I've been experiencing some degree of loneliness, and it's on and off, and it comes in waves. And then I find myself really yearning for connection and community, but also sometimes falling back into the self-reliance where when that's offered, I don't say yes to it, or my instinct at least might be to decline offers of help and support when that is really what I need, when like really I so deeply desire support and connection and reciprocity, but it's a scary thing to take yourself out of a place of self-reliance and out of a place of limitation, and to recognize that you need other people. That we've been fed a lot of messaging around hyper-independence and individualism, especially in the United States and in this sphere of the world where individualism is more common than a sort of collective mindset or community-oriented mindset, that it can be seen as good, like independence good. And I think independence can be beautiful. And I am a very independent person and I value that about myself and I really appreciate it in other people too. But there comes a point where we do need to kind of understand how or see how we're going to deconstruct our walls bit by bit and move toward each other and share. And so seeing the contrast here of the cards that I have laid out, again, limitation, the lovers, and then and then the Nine of Pentacles, I see these two paths. I see this path toward accumulation and toward often maybe material success that we might trade for intimacy and for depth of connection and for community. Whereas the lovers is this card of union. It's a card of choosing love, of overcoming the fears that we might have about revealing ourselves, being seen, being vulnerable to pain and to loss, and overcoming that because we make the choice to love. We make the choice to be in connection. We make the choice to open our hearts and to sort of lay ourselves bare so that we can experience something bigger. I mentioned this is tender for me. It's honestly been a very tender day. It's been a toughie, and these themes are really on point because I'm experiencing a lot of grief over the loss of someone really, really dear to me. And that is a product of, I think, in many ways, limitation. There is a sense of like that I feel of being pushed away in this moment and of being like seeing the block but not being able to move it. And how when we experience that from someone else, we often just have to, or we don't have to, we can fight it. We can try our might to move that block. We can try to push the boulder up the hill. We can try to like change our circumstances ourselves. But what I'm sort of like chewing on today is how sometimes and often the loving thing is just to let someone grow on their own time and to back away and to give themselves, to give them the space that they need in order to find their own truth. And when you're at different stages when it comes to connection and life and desire and open-heartedness and all of this stuff, you might often encounter experiences where like you're pushing someone else away who's open, or someone else is pushing you away. And it's complicated when you feel like you can see through that. You can see through the veil of your blockages or their blockages, or when someone else can see through your stuff and say like, I see that you're pushing me away. And in this image of the card, this person is leaning, again, they're leaning forward. They're like, I want to come toward you chest first. There are no defenses here. Like this person is pressing their chest into the other person's hand and standing there sort of like, I'm here, you know, I'm not even taking a step toward you. I'm here with my chest open, with my heart open. And so when you recognize the blockage between you and someone else, or between you and a desire, a goal, whatever it is, where limitation is showing up, there's often this push and pull where maybe something or someone wants to come toward you and you take a step back, and it becomes this dance where then maybe that person walks away, or maybe that experience or that opportunity is no longer there. And you might want to lurch forward then and come toward it. And that sort of like anxious dance of like, I want you, but I don't want you, or I want you, but I'm afraid, or I want this, but I'm afraid. And, you know, going back to the message in the actual guidebook here, they say that not that smallness is bad, but choosing fear over growth is telling the world I don't have what it needs. It's saying, no, I can't, no, I shouldn't, and making up reasons to disappear into the walls I've built between me and my fate. Limitation is not imposed, it is chosen long after the walls were lifted away. So the bit about the making up of reasons and like telling the world I don't have what it needs, and making the choice to stay in fear, which is really what it is. This is a choice. It's a choice that we make to limit ourselves from what it is that we might truly be guided toward, or what we might feel a real soul tug toward, and we might say no. It reminds me actually of this, okay, tangent. Sorry, I'm a little loopy tonight, but it reminds me of something that happened for me that I always think about. Shortly after I graduated from college, I had a fellow writer who wrote for, I can't even remember what it was. I don't know if it was LA Magazine or LA Weekly, but it was a music column. And this was a person that I had known since like middle school maybe, and who I went to high school and college with. And he reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to take over his role as music writer. And at the time, I had no idea where I wanted to go. I was living in Santa Barbara after college and was working a few jobs, like a few like hourly jobs, and just like having no clear sense of what was next for me. And I remember feeling like, holy shit, this is such an amazing opportunity to be able to go see all of these artists perform in LA and to like write about these live music experiences. This is a dream. I have had a deep connection to music for my whole life, basically. And it was like fusing these two passions of mine to see this opportunity. And I remember this deep feeling of imposter syndrome coming over me, and I sabotaged it. I didn't reach out. He gave me the contact info. He said that he had like passed along good words about me and made a strong recommendation, and I just never reached out. I freaked out. I made something up, made an excuse, didn't really get back to him. And I think about that to this day, not in like a regretful way, like, oh, damn, I should have done that, but more in like a, wow, that could have changed the trajectory of my life. It would have changed the trajectory of my life, because I may have ended up like staying in Los Angeles, or going back to Los Angeles, which is where I grew up. And I didn't. I moved to San Francisco, and I'm grateful I did, and that was the right choice for me. But I sometimes think about how, like, what a powerful decision that was for me to decide I was not capable of doing that. In doing that, I shut myself off to a whole career, potentially, to a whole career path, to a whole culture, to a whole community that could have been right there for me if I wanted it. And I did want it in a way. I mean, I didn't want to move back to LA, to be honest, but I did like want to experience the lifestyle of being a music writer. Like, it sounded dope. It sounded fucking awesome. And I think in many ways it could have been beautiful, and it could have suited me, and maybe been a pain in the ass too. But like, I share that because it always comes up in my mind when I think about imposter syndrome, and when I think about the things we say no to because something in us is telling us that we're not worthy. Something in us is telling us that it's unsafe. Usually our mind, usually fear, usually a story, usually this belief, this deep-seated belief that we are not enough as we are, and that everything will fall apart if we move towards something that we perceive as being too much, too big, too good, too beautiful, whatever, fill in the blank. There's often some type of narrative that guides us away and that guides us towards saying no. And, you know, I've heard so many times that like hospice workers and nurses and folks who provide end-of-life care will report that the thing that people say at the end of their lives is that they wished they had said, I love you. They wished they had taken the risk. They wished they had traveled. They wished they had said yes to something that they said no to, because it's like this untapped well of life experience that was purely motivated by fear. Like the pure motivation of fear that told them that if they moved in that direction, then something catastrophic would happen or they might lose what they have. And so it's really, I feel that coming through. I feel like the yearning and the ache for what we don't get to experience because our self-limiting beliefs hold us back and tell us that we're not worthy. And sometimes the only real medicine for that type of belief is to prove it, to show it to yourself, to demonstrate to yourself that you can do it, or that you are worthy, or that you are lovable. And it's through facing those fears and through taking a leap of sorts and saying yes to life and saying yes to what's authentic to us that we begin to unlearn that old narrative and to replace it with new ones that open us up to openness and expansiveness and possibility. So I want to finish off with our song, and it's really on point. Let me pull up the lyrics. So it's Road by Nick Drake. I love this song. Reminds me of high school. Reminds me of one of my first boyfriends. We used to listen to Nick Drake in my car all the time. So this song starts with, you can say the sun is shining if you really want to. I can see the moon and it seems so clear. You can take the road that takes you to the stars now. I can take a road that'll see me through. And then it just repeats, I can take a road that'll see me through. Really short lyrics, but a pretty poignant song that talks about two people that are seeing things from different perspectives. One person sees the sun shining, the other sees the moon. One person sees this expansive, maybe sort of whimsical, dreamy possibility, the road that takes you to the stars, whereas the other person sees the road that will see them through, that will maybe just get them from point A to point B. And perspective is everything when it comes to limitation. We can see ourselves as shining. We can see ourselves as this sort of luminous sun energy, solar energy. We can also see the moon, which is, arguably just as luminous, but in a different way. But there's this idea of one person being able to see brightness and the other shadow. One person being able to see, again, possibility, dreaminess, magic, and the other practicality. And often, our roads do diverge. The song is called Road. It's about roads. It's about choosing different roads that suit us where we're at and that maybe serve to reinforce our perspective, maybe serve to open us up. But Nick Drake in this song is kind of saying, like, you can see things that way, but I'm going to do what I know works. You can see maybe life through like an optimistic perspective, or you can see the sun. I'm going to choose to see the shadows here. I'm going to choose to see or take the road that is sure, the road that is safe, the road that like I've maybe ridden many, many times before. And that, to me, interestingly, I used to not hear this song this way, but I'm hearing it this way tonight. I wonder, for those listening, which feels more comfortable to you? Which feels like the, quote, right path to take? Is it the one that's like well-worn, that you've walked, that is sure, that is steady, that is safe? Or is it the road that's expansive and maybe unknown and maybe brings up fear and maybe brings up things that you cannot perceive or possibly comprehend? There's like the road less traveled, which is like such a super familiar concept in literary history for a lot of us. But like the idea of the road less traveled is that we might forge our own path and go in a direction that's unexpected, but that yields potentially beautiful outcomes. Potentially not. Maybe both, usually both. But I think that this card limitation combined with the song and all of this divination is really this energy of like, will you make the daring choice or will you commit to what feels safe? Which one will take you to where you want to go? Do you know where you want to go? Sometimes just the not knowing ourselves and not knowing our true desires holds us back because we can't imagine what we can't yet see. Or no, I mixed that up. I flipped that around. We can't see what we can't imagine, and we can't really move toward what we can't imagine. And if we're caught up in self-limiting beliefs that kind of like taper down our imagination and stop our imaginative processes and keep us in a box, then we might just stay in the box because we can't see another future. We can't see another possibility. I hope you don't do that. I hope you take the road less traveled and maybe the road that will take you to the stars. But that's not the path for everyone. Sometimes we do decide and need safety and consistency and predictability in life. And there is honor in that. And sometimes there's truth and there's self-honoring in that. And a lot of the times it is a belief that's holding us back. A lot of the time it is a belief that's preventing us from taking a step toward the stars, from taking a step toward our desires and toward our truth. That is all I have tonight. I thank you for being here. If you enjoy this podcast, please consider leaving me a 5-star rating or a review. You can leave comments on Apple Podcasts and I think other platforms too. And if you would like to support me in other ways, you can become a patron for as little as $6 a month. I share a lot of exclusive content there, and that also gives you access to our patron-only channels on my Feeling Loudly Discord. That Discord is also just available to the public. You're welcome to join if you're interested in chatting and connecting with some kind-hearted, witchy humans on the internet. I think it's a really soft and sweet space that's also full of a lot of very interesting humans and conversations. So that link is in the show notes below if you would like to join us on Discord. And as usual, I'm always offering astrology, tarot, and Akashic Records readings. I'm likely going to be restructuring my services soon. So if you have been thinking about booking a reading with me at my current rates and like within my current services, I'd really recommend booking soon. It's likely going to be shifting in Gemini season. And so now would be the time to book a service if you see something or you've had your eye on something, because it's very possible that that might get adjusted or even just wiped away. More on that to come, and the best way to stay in touch with me and get updates on my services, my offerings, events, etc., is by signing up for my newsletter. And you can also find the link to my newsletter down in the show notes below. Thank you, humans. I appreciate you, and I'm wishing you a really sweet weekend. Take care.